Before we dive into today's intense story, a quick reminder. Over 90% of our viewers watch our videos but aren't subscribed. If you enjoy content like this, take a second to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. And if you find this story gripping, don't forget to like the video. It really helps us out.
My name is Emily, and if someone had told me years ago that my life would unravel in the way it did, I would have laughed it off. I lived what many would call the perfect life. I was married to Daniel, my high school sweetheart. He was charming, attentive, and for years I believed we shared a love that was unbreakable. We built a beautiful home together, and for a long time I thought we were truly happy. But as I sit here now, recounting every painful detail, I realize how blind I was to the cracks that were growing silently beneath the surface. Our life seemed picture perfect. Daniel worked as a senior manager at a reputable firm while I balanced my job as a freelance graphic designer from home. This allowed me to be more present for our two children, Sophie and Ethan. We spent weekends together as a family, hosted barbecues for friends, and took vacations that filled my social media feed with smiles and sunsets. But behind the smiling photos was a growing distance between Daniel and me. One I kept trying to close, only to find myself alone on the bridge. It started subtly. Daniel began working late more often. At first, I dismissed it as him being dedicated and hardworking. Then came the constant business trips that seemed to pop up without much notice. I made excuses for him to our friends and family, convincing myself that his career demanded sacrifices. But deep down, a small voice whispered doubts that I was too scared to listen to. One evening, as I was folding laundry, I noticed a faint scent on his shirt, a perfume I didn't recognize. It wasn't mine. When I questioned him, he laughed it off, blaming a client's overly enthusiastic hug. His explanation was smooth, convincing even, and I felt guilty for doubting him. But that nagging voice inside me grew louder. Then there was his phone. Daniel had always been open about his phone, leaving it casually on the kitchen counter or nightstand. But over the past several months, it rarely left his side. He started setting a password, something he had never done before. When I asked about it, he told me it was due to company policy, new security measures. Again, I forced myself to believe him. Still, my instincts wouldn't rest. I began noticing how distant he had become emotionally. Our conversations grew shorter, more transactional. Our intimacy, once vibrant, had dwindled into occasional, perfunctory gestures. He avoided eye contact when discussing future plans, and his smiles rarely reached his eyes. The man I had loved for so many years was slipping away from me, and I didn't know how to stop it. Then came the night that shattered my illusions completely. Daniel had left for yet another business trip, this time claiming he had to meet clients in Chicago. But something felt off. The way he packed, the way he avoided my gaze before leaving, the way he rushed out the door, it all felt rehearsed. That night, unable to sleep, I sat on the couch scrolling mindlessly through social media when I received a message from an unknown account. The message simply read, "You deserve to know the truth." Attached was a photo of Daniel at a cozy-looking restaurant. Across from him sat a woman I didn't recognize. They were leaning toward each other, laughing, and Daniel was holding her hand. My heart dropped. My hands trembled as I stared at the image. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I replied to the message, demanding to know who they were. The sender revealed herself to be an acquaintance of the woman in the photo. Her name was Claire, and she was a colleague of Daniel's. Apparently, their affair had been ongoing for nearly a year. My stomach churned as I read the details. Business trips were often romantic getaways. Late nights at work were nights spent in her apartment. My entire world crumbled in an instant. I didn't cry at first. Instead, I sat there, paralyzed, my mind racing through every memory, every lie, every moment where I had dismissed my instincts. I felt foolish, betrayed, but above all, I felt a cold determination growing inside me. I was not going to let him break me. The next morning, while he was still away, I dug deeper. I checked our shared bank accounts, credit card statements, and hotel bookings. The evidence was everywhere: dinners, jewelry, hotel stays, paid for with the same account we used to buy groceries for our children. My heart broke all over again. But with each discovery, my resolve grew stronger. I made copies of everything: screenshots, statements, receipts. If I was going to confront him, I wanted to be prepared. But confrontation wasn't enough. Daniel had not only betrayed me, but also made a mockery of our marriage, our family, and everything we had built. I wanted him to feel the weight of his betrayal. I wanted him to see what it was like to lose everything he took for granted. When Daniel returned from his trip, I greeted him as usual, masking my emotions with a forced smile. He kissed me on the cheek and acted as though nothing was wrong. The audacity of his calmness infuriated me, but I maintained my composure. I knew that exposing him in a fit of rage would give him an advantage. Instead, I needed to be strategic, calculated. Over the following weeks, I played the role of the oblivious wife, observing him closely, gathering more information. I even befriended Claire anonymously online using a fake profile. She was boastful, sharing private details that painted a clearer picture of their affair. She believed Daniel was planning to leave me for her soon. That was when I realized the full extent of his deception. He wasn't just having an affair. He was building a parallel life, one where I and our children were expendable. I couldn't let him destroy our family so easily. My revenge had to be precise, and I knew exactly where to start. Daniel's company prided itself on its strict code of ethics. Workplace affairs, especially involving subordinates, were grounds for immediate dismissal. Claire was not just any colleague. She was an intern he had been supervising. The company's policy was crystal clear about relationships of this nature. All I needed was to ensure the right people received the right information. I compiled the evidence meticulously: screenshots of text messages, photos, bank statements, even the company's policy handbook highlighting the relevant sections. I created an anonymous email account and drafted a letter addressed to the company's HR department. I attached everything, carefully disguising my identity to avoid any legal backlash. The email was sent late at night. My heart raced as I hit send, knowing that by morning the first domino would fall. But my plan didn't end there. At home, I continued my act of ignorance while quietly consulting a divorce attorney. I learned that in our state, infidelity had significant implications on alimony, asset division, and even custody arrangements. Every step I took was calculated to protect my children and secure our future. Days later, Daniel came home visibly shaken. He said little during dinner, barely touching his food. I watched him squirm, feigning concern as he rubbed his temples and sighed heavily. Then his phone rang, and he excused himself to the study. Through the thin walls, I heard snippets of the conversation, words like investigation, policy violation, and HR. The company had launched a formal investigation into his relationship with Claire. His carefully constructed facade was beginning to crack. Yet Daniel still had no idea I was behind any of it. What Daniel didn't know was that Claire, in her panic, had started reaching out to me through my fake online profile, venting her fears. She spoke of how HR had summoned her for questioning, how Daniel promised to fix everything, and how she worried about losing her internship. She had no clue she was feeding me more ammunition. As the investigation escalated, Daniel grew more distant, consumed by his problems at work. He spent hours on the phone with his lawyer trying to salvage his career. Our home, once filled with laughter and family dinners, became eerily silent. The tension was suffocating, but I remained calm, continuing to gather every new piece of information. Finally, the day came when Daniel received official notice of his suspension pending termination. His once promising career was hanging by a thread. I could see the fear in his eyes as he realized the gravity of his situation. But this was only the beginning. I wasn't done yet. After Daniel's suspension, the atmosphere in our home shifted completely. The man who once walked with confidence now paced nervously, biting his nails and avoiding my gaze. I watched him unravel, every day revealing more of his weakness. He was a shadow of the man I once knew, and yet he still didn't know that the person pulling the strings behind his misery was standing right in front of him, sharing the same roof, sharing the same table. While Daniel's professional world crumbled, I worked quietly on the next phase of my plan. I wanted to make sure that when I finally confronted him, there would be no escape, no room for excuses or manipulations. I wasn't just seeking revenge, I was reclaiming my dignity, my future, and most importantly, the well-being of our children. Claire, too, was sinking deeper into panic. She had been placed on leave pending the investigation, and though she tried to reach out to Daniel for reassurance, he began pulling away from her. His texts to her became shorter, colder. I intercepted many of their conversations through the online profile I had used to befriend her. It was almost poetic watching their relationship fall apart under the pressure I had orchestrated. Around this time, I met with my attorney once again. We carefully reviewed every document I had collected. In our state, marital misconduct had serious consequences in divorce proceedings, especially when it involved using marital assets for an extramarital relationship. My lawyer assured me that the financial and custody settlements would likely be in my favor, as long as I continued to build my case meticulously. I also began recording my interactions with Daniel, his cold behavior, his late-night phone calls, his financial transactions. Everything was documented. I wasn't going to leave any room for him to twist the narrative when the time came. Despite the storm brewing around him, Daniel continued to put on a facade of normalcy whenever he interacted with friends or family. He wanted to project an image of a hard-working man facing unfortunate circumstances at work. Little did they know that his downfall was self-inflicted, and the truth would eventually come to light. Weeks passed, and the investigation at his company reached its conclusion. Daniel was called into a final meeting where he was officially terminated for violating company policies. His reputation was destroyed. His promising career, built over years of hard work, was gone. I watched him return home that evening, defeated, his shoulders slumped, eyes hollow. He sat on the couch in silence, staring at nothing. For days after his termination, Daniel barely spoke. He stayed locked in his study, making frantic calls to headhunters, trying to find new employment, but word of his dismissal had already spread in the professional circles. His name was now associated with scandal, and no one wanted to take the risk of hiring him. Then came the financial strain. Without his income, our lavish lifestyle was no longer sustainable. The expensive vacations, the luxury cars, the private school tuition for our children, all suddenly impossible to maintain. I had already prepared for this. My freelance work allowed me to support myself and the children, and with the financial evidence I had gathered, I knew the court would ensure Daniel carried the burden of his actions. One evening, as we sat at the dinner table in tense silence, Daniel finally broke. His voice was low, shaky. "Emily, I've made mistakes. I know I've let you down. I want to fix this for our family." His sudden display of remorse might have worked months ago, but now it was too late. I looked him in the eyes and spoke calmly. "Mistakes? Daniel, this wasn't a mistake. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is saying something hurtful in anger. What you did was a choice, repeatedly, for over a year." He looked down, unable to meet my gaze. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not fear of losing me, but fear of losing everything. I stood up from the table, my heart pounding, but my voice steady. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. You'll be served with divorce papers soon. And Daniel, I know everything, every hotel, every dinner, every lie. I've kept the receipts." His face turned pale. "Emily, please, don't do this. Think about the kids." "I am thinking about the kids," I replied firmly. "That's exactly why I'm doing this. They deserve better than a father who throws away his family for cheap thrills. And I deserve better than a husband who lies and cheats. Daniel tried to argue, but his words faltered. He knew he had no defense. The mountain of evidence I held was overwhelming, and he had no idea how much I had truly gathered. The following week, I filed for divorce. The court proceedings moved swiftly thanks to the strength of my case. The judge awarded me primary custody of Sophie and Ethan, full ownership of our home, and a significant portion of Daniel's remaining assets. He was also ordered to pay child support and spousal maintenance. The financial burden was crushing for him, but he had brought it all upon himself. Word of our divorce and the scandal surrounding it spread quickly among our friends, family, and community. Daniel's carefully crafted image of the perfect husband and father was shattered. Claire, on the other hand, vanished from the picture entirely. She lost her internship and moved out of state, unable to face the humiliation. As for me, I felt a strange sense of peace as the dust settled. I had spent so many sleepless nights tormented by his betrayal, but now I was free. Free to rebuild my life on my terms, free to raise my children in a home filled with honesty and love, free from the shadow of a man who had taken me for granted. But even as I tried to move forward, Daniel's fall from grace wasn't over. The final phase of my revenge was still unfolding, one that would ensure he never forgot the price of his betrayal. Even after the divorce was finalized, Daniel tried desperately to rebuild his life. But his fall was steeper than even I had imagined. Word of his dismissal spread throughout his professional network, and job offers never came. His reputation was in ruins, not only because of the affair, but because of how publicly it had all unraveled. But my final move wasn't about his career. It was about his reputation in the very community where he once held so much pride. Daniel had always loved being admired, the generous neighbor, the involved father, the respected professional. He attended charity events, school functions, and community gatherings like a local celebrity. I knew exactly where his deepest pride lay, and where the deepest wound would hurt. After the divorce, I quietly shared the truth with close friends and community members who had always supported us. I never spoke with anger or bitterness. Instead, I simply told the truth, calmly and with evidence when needed. People who once admired him began seeing him for who he truly was. Invitations to events stopped coming. Mutual friends distanced themselves. Even at our children's school functions, Daniel sat alone, uncomfortable under the quiet stares and whispers around him. Claire tried contacting him again after months of silence. But by then, Daniel wanted nothing to do with her. She had cost him everything, and now she was just another reminder of his destruction. The fantasy he once built with her had collapsed entirely. Meanwhile, I focused on healing and rebuilding. My business grew stronger. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during my years of blindly supporting Daniel's career. Sophie and Ethan adjusted better than I expected, and with counseling, they slowly found stability again. I made sure they never felt the full weight of what had happened, shielding them from the ugliest parts of their father's mistakes. Ironically, Daniel eventually had to sell his luxury car and move into a small apartment. The life he once flaunted was gone. His expensive suits were replaced by budget clothing. His once pristine appearance was now disheveled and tired. Occasionally, when he came to pick up the kids, I barely recognized him. He avoided my eyes, speaking only what was necessary. One rainy afternoon, months after everything, he finally broke the silence between us. Standing on my front porch, his voice was weak. "Emily, I know I don't deserve anything from you, but I want you to know that I regret everything. I ruined my life, our family, and I know I'll never fix what I broke." For a moment, I almost pitied him. But then I remembered every sleepless night, every lie, every moment I questioned my own sanity because of his betrayal. I calmly replied, "Daniel, regret doesn't erase what you did. The damage is done. You made your choices. Now you live with them." He nodded, defeated, and walked away in the rain. As I closed the door behind him, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Not because I had destroyed him, but because I had reclaimed my life without sinking to his level. My revenge wasn't loud or dramatic. It was patient, calculated, and most importantly, complete. Daniel would live every day knowing that his choices had cost him everything, and I would live every day knowing that I had survived, stronger than ever.